Ladies, gentlemen, and brethren, welcome to this month's Solomon Live. My name is Brodie. I'm the Provincial Communications Officer for the rather distinctive province of Worcestershire, and I also have the honour of hosting these monthly webinars of engaging Freemasonry conversation. And the wonderful thing about us being live in your home or wherever you are this evening, if you'd like to put a question to our very special guest this evening, you can do so via our question and answer facility at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. So without any further ado, let's welcome our special guest talking about the theatre of Freemasonry. Very worshipful Brother Charles Hopkinson-Woolley, the Grand Director of Ceremonies. Sir, how are you?
Good evening, Brodie. I'm very well indeed, thank you. How are you?
Very good, very good. And are you keeping cool, by the way? Because where I am at the moment, it's a little bit hot in here, and I've got a feeling this quiff's going to come down anytime now.
I'm doing my best.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Now, what we always like to do, Charles, is begin by getting to know you and finding out about your life in Freemasonry as well as the real world. So, when did you become a Mason? What drew you in to Masonry?
So I had friends at university who were Masons, and I joined the army. I was in the army, and my brother joined Apollo University Lodge, the same lodge that some of my university friends have been in. And he said to me one day, he said, "I think you'd enjoy Freemasonry. Maybe you ought to join." And I knew that my sergeant's mess was a Masonic lodge. It was St. Patrick's Lodge, number 295 in the Irish Constitution, a travelling lodge. Oh. And I didn't really understand Freemasonry in those days. And I thought, well, it might be a bit awkward if I say to my troop, "Hey, right, we're going to go left flanking lots of smoke." And the troop sergeant said, "Well, no, because you're only the junior warden and I'm the master. We're going to go right flanking." So I didn't really understand it. So I said, "I think I'll wait till I've left the army." I knew I was going to leave the army. And then when I left the army, I said to my brother, you talked about Freemasonry. I think I'm ready to join. So I was 26 years old, I think, when I said that, and 27 when I was initiated.
Wow. And what was it like when you first joined? I'm always interested to know what it was like when you first became a Mason. Was it everything you thought it was going to be? Was it completely different? What was that experience like for you?
I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I think these days we're better at communicating to candidates what they might expect. But in those days, it was all, people were a bit worried about saying anything very much. So I didn't really know what to expect. I joined my old school lodge. I was initiated at the school in the Queen's Temple, which was an amazing place to be initiated. And I can still remember parts of it. In particular, I can remember they put a screen, because the Queen's Temple has glass doors so you can see in. It wouldn't be easy to do a raising in, but initiation it works fine. But they put a screen that they thought I could change behind so that I couldn't see in, and it was a surprise. But of course, I'm so tall that I could see straight over the top. I've never forgotten that. No, it was an amazing experience. I joined a really wonderful lodge. Lodge is my mother lodge. I'm incredibly proud of. Some wonderful Masons who made sure that it had a really good heart. So we had good ritual. We had a lovely warm manner. There was no tut-tutting or criticism or whatever. They were really careful to look after those of us who were joining, who were in our 20s and early 30s. So it was a really lovely, warm lodge to join.
Oh, and that makes the world of difference, doesn't it, Charles? And let's talk about what you do when you're not in Masonry, your career, if you will.
So after I left the army, I joined a firm called Cazenove & Co., which was a very traditional stockbroking firm. Wonderful, wonderful place to begin a career. And I specialised in equity sales, so selling shares to institutional investors, but particularly in investment trusts. And over time, I wanted to learn more. I moved to Deutsche Bank for a bit. I was a specialist in derivatives. Then I worked in hedge funds. I raised capital for hedge funds for a period of time. And then I moved into management. So now I work for Invesco. I head up the product management function for the private markets business. So my team look after investor relations for all of our clients around the world, our product management, our product development, and our product strategy. So it's a fantastic role. I absolutely love it. I love being a manager of managers, and it still keeps me interested, still keeps me excited. I still love going in every day.
Well, you can tell you love it, Charles. It's palpable, actually. But how do you manage to squeeze your Freemasonry and work together? Because you're an incredibly busy Freemason. We've just heard what you do in the outside world as well. How do you manage to make both worlds meet?
Well, there's always a way. I mean, I'm a great believer at work. I'm an early starter. I'm in the office by 7:30. I have a sort of golden hour and a half when I can get things done when other people haven't turned up. And on a normal working day, if I'm not doing, if I'm just going home after work, I'll be in the office till about 6:30. So I'll pack the hours in on those days. So I don't feel guilty if I'm leaving at 5 or 5:30 to go to a meeting. And then the rest I just take as holiday if I need to. I'm quite lucky. I get quite a good generous holiday allowance, so I can just work it into that. And I have a very patient family, which is very important.
Yes. Once again, you've won the lottery with that as well, haven't you? If you've got that in Freemasonry. And before we talk about your high office, are you Director of Ceremonies in any craft lodges?
Well, I have been over the years. I mean, the funny thing is that when I was in my, I just had joined my mother lodge, and I was just, going up inner guard, junior deacon, senior deacon. I always thought that I could never be a director of ceremonies. It was the most terrifying role. I thought, I'd love to be secretary, perhaps. Maybe I could be almoner or a charity steward, but director of ceremonies would never be something I would aspire to. And of course, I ended up becoming a deputy grand director of ceremonies. And as soon as that happened, most of the units I was in said, "Oh, could you be our DC? Could you be our MC? Could you do this?" And so I've been a director of ceremonies or a master of ceremonies in quite a few of the units I'm in, and actually it's a completely different role from being grand director of ceremonies. There are more differences than similarities, I would say, and I would argue that there are probably a lot of directors of ceremonies listening tonight who I think probably are much better lodge or chapter DC than I am. But it's a wonderful role to have in any lodge or chapter. It's a tremendous honor, and I loved it when I did it. I'm the only lodge that I'm currently DC in is Royal Alpha, and that is the lodge that I by consequence of my appointment as Grand Director of Ceremonies, I'm automatically the Director of Ceremonies of Royal Alpha. Oh. And I try not to take too much on in my private lodges at the moment, because obviously I'm pretty busy being GDC.
Well, I'm glad you've actually mentioned Provincial Director of Ceremonies and Director of Ceremonies, because I guarantee we have got a lot of those listening, including mine in Worcestershire. Pete Broughton has just messaged to say he's enjoying our Solomon Live tonight. So we've talked about your early days of Freemasonry. Let's get right up to date. Let's talk about your role as Grand Director of Ceremonies. And we'll talk about a massive compliment that was bestowed upon that title a little bit later on. For the want of a better word, Charles, how did you get that gig?
I have no idea. One day, someone rang me up. My predecessor rang me up and said, "Charles, would you meet me for a drink?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And of course, my immediate reaction was I must have done something terribly wrong. I couldn't think what it was. And he said, if you were offered the role, would you be able to take it? And I don't know any more detail than that. It's way above my pay grade. I suspect, as and when I'm told that it's my turn to walk the plank, I may or may not have any say in who my successor is. I've got no idea. But I do know that I'm fantastically lucky to have this wonderful role.
Oh, it is a superb job. And it was our former program master, Peter Lowndes, who actually said it is the best job in all of Freemasonry. Why? And he mentioned this on this Solomon Live, because people have to do what you tell them to do.
Yes, I think that's true of a lot of people, not absolutely everyone. But actually, the point I think about it is you have a chance to influence the way things happen. You have a chance to influence the ceremonies you're involved in. You have a chance to make them more fun or more enjoyable or more memorable, and particularly for the people who are taking part in them. So I think it's a way that you can really put your heart and soul into Freemasonry and give back. Freemasonry's given so much to me. I see this role as a way that I can hopefully give something back to Freemasonry.
Oh, you do. You absolutely do. Let's talk about the role of Grand Director of Ceremonies, because we've got lots of people viewing this evening, as you can imagine, varying levels of experience in Masonry, non-Masons joining us as well. How would you describe your role other than quarterly communication and annual investiture? What else does it involve?
So if you look at the Book of Constitutions, it says that the Grand Director of Ceremonies shall have control of all of the regalia of the Grand Lodge, which I think means that actually, if that's the case, John Vasquez must be the Grand Director of Ceremonies. But the actual practicalities of the role are that I look after, or my team look after, quarter communications, the annual investitures of Grand Lodge and Supreme Grand Chapter. We will get involved in the bicentenaries, the festivals, and most importantly, provincial Grand Masters installations, district Grand Masters installations sometimes, Grand Superintendents. So a lot of those big ceremonial events, we will be involved. And then some of the smaller things too, for example, on Saturday, I escorted the Program Master to a meeting of the London Rugby Lodge, which
Yes.
was a hugely well-attended meeting.
Saw the pictures or the photographs.
Enormous
Absolutely
fun.
brilliant.
A lot of refreshment, great day, great day, huge fun. So it could be anything from taking a ruler to a private lodge to a provincial lodge to a meeting of Grand Lodge. So lots and lots of different things going on through the year.
And this brings me on nicely to our first question of the evening, Charles. Thank you ever so much indeed, brethren, for submitting those. And this comes from Liam Kenny, and he says, have you travelled much as GDC in the UK, beyond perhaps? And also he says, which is lovely actually, thank you for giving up your time this evening on this very warm Tuesday night across the United Kingdom. So travel within that role.
So there's a lot of travel within England and Wales, because obviously when we're doing provincial installations, we will go and do those in location. So we were up in Durham last year, Yorkshire North and East Riding, Yorkshire West Riding. So we had a trio of northern ones quite close together. So yeah, we travel around the England and Wales quite a lot. There have been times when we've gone abroad to do district installations. So as Grand Director of Ceremonies, I've been to Jamaica, I've been to Zambia, I've been to the Orange Free State. So they don't come up that often. So it's a special, very special when it does. But that does happen occasionally.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. And also, and this I learned from our conversation that we had just a few days ago, Charles, your work with our Grandmaster, the Duke of Kent. Tell me about that, because I think a lot of people joining us here who perhaps have a modicum of knowledge about what you do, perhaps don't know that side of your role.
Yeah, so I'm effectively his Masonic equerry or ADC. So when he is on a Masonic visit of some sort, whether it's in Freemasons Hall or whether it's somewhere else, I will effectively escort him. So I will meet him at the car door, I will greet him on the pavement, I will look after him until he's finished that Masonic duty and he goes away again. So that's a very, very special part of the role, and one that has been remarkable, really very memorable, and a huge honour.
Oh, I can only imagine. Now we need to get right up to date again, because there's a little event going on, just a little event in Wales next Wednesday. Quarterly communication on the road, if you will. The first time this has happened in a very, very long time indeed. How are you feeling about that? Because that must be an all new level of pressure.
I am so excited about it. I mean, I think one of the things that we always, as any Grand Director of Ceremonies will tell you, is when you travel, you have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable, because you don't know what the temple's going to look like when you get there. Freemasons Hall in Great Queen Street is set up to be absolutely spot on, or we've just evolved how we do it, and it works every time. You know what you're doing. But when you travel, you don't know whether the stairs onto the dais are going to be in the middle or at the side, or as they are in the fact in the ICC, offset slightly to one side, whether you're going to have enough room on the stage to fit the people onto it that you want to fit on it, and in the access and so on. So you just have to be adaptable. So I've been down already to the ICC a few weeks ago to go and have a look. I've got a plan. They always, in the army, there's a saying that no plan of battle survives first contact with the enemy. So of course it'll be interesting whether my plan survives first contact with a Grand Officer. But no, I have a plan which I think is going to work, and I think it's going to be an absolutely wonderful day.
Oh, I cannot wait. As your Grand Pursuivant, I can't begin to tell you how excited I am about that. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier on, it's almost like being a big kid, how much I'm looking forward to it. Have you had any sleepless nights over this year, or any nightmares, by the way?
I did have one, actually. I was on holiday. We were in Iceland for our summer holiday, and I woke up and I'd had this nightmare that I was at the ICC and we were just about to start calling out the procession. And I realized that I hadn't had any rehearsals at all. And I thought, it's going to be the most tremendous car crash. And then luckily I woke up and it was fine. But you do spend a lot of time when it's something like that. You go through it in your mind, and you walk the course in your mind, and you try to imagine each sequence of events to try to think, now normally in Grand Lodge, this person sees that person doing that, and then they do this. And when we're going to Wales, most of the procession are going to be invisible to each other. One side won't be able to see the other side, nor will they be able to see the people at the front of the procession, nor will the people on the stage be able to see the back of the procession. So I've had to come up with a plan that means that it hopefully, we'll find out next week, hopefully it will all work like clockwork, without me having to sort of panic, bark orders, or change anything. But we'll see. I won't know until we get there. So you can be sure, anyone who's going to be there next week, that when you hear me say "Be seated, brethren," you know that I'll be sitting down with a huge sense of relief.
Oh, well, look, it will be just fine. And I, for one, cannot wait. Counting the days, the hours even. Another question, Charles, if that's okay. This is a lovely one, actually. Before we talk about the role of a Director of Ceremonies as a whole, and ritual, and how we can all get involved in that. Alan McLean has been in touch. Alan, good evening. Thank you for stopping by on this very warm evening. He says, I attended the Grand Rank Investiture this year as a guest, and I was completely taken back how you were able to reel off the Grandmaster's seemingly endless list of honours and appointments. How do you go about remembering such a huge, complex list flawlessly without hesitation? By the way, he's not asking me that question, Charles. That's
Well, I think it was the one thing that was said to me when I became Grand Director of Ceremonies was, that's the one thing that no Grand Director of Ceremonies can ever get wrong. So I thought, no pressure then. Look, it's something that everyone's got their own way of learning. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but everyone's got their own way of learning things, and I just constantly repeat things. So I probably say that to myself 2 or 3 times a day, because whenever I'm not doing something else, I think, oh, there's probably a good opportunity to say, be it known that, or best way of all, if I'm trying to get to sleep, I'll just start saying it in my head, and it's fantastic. So I just hope it's not there's not some sort of Pavlovian thing where I start saying it in the temple one day and I fall asleep. I mean, that would be
no. That's when you really do need to have another look at it, don't you? If that starts happening. Rulers. We have rulers, and they're a very integral part of your work.
Yeah.
What kind of relationship do you have with them? How closely do you work with them?
So I think inevitably I will see more of them than most Masons, but I'm not, in their pockets. I quite often need their thoughts on things, particularly the program masters. Obviously, he's I'm keen to make sure that what I do doesn't depart from his ideas of the way I should be doing the role. So a fair amount of contact, but it's sort of sporadic. When we have a quarter communication or an investiture, there's obviously a lot more contact around that. And then, during the summer, I might speak to only 1 or 2 of them, once a month, something like that. So it varies, but it's a privilege of the role that I have that, I do have a lot of contact with them and a huge admiration for them.
That's good to hear. And was it ever daunting at the start when you had to work so closely with our rulers of Freemasonry? Was that a daunting task at the beginning?
I don't think I was daunted by the rulers, because actually, as soon as you become a deputy Grand Director of Ceremonies, you have a fair amount of contact with the rulers. Yes. So my deputy probably spend almost as much time talking to rulers as I do, actually. So I don't think that was daunting. I mean, inevitably, with any role like this, when you first take it on, there is that element of imposter syndrome. How on earth did I end up here? And surely they've chosen the wrong person. How many people turned it down before I was idiotic enough to say yes? But actually, I've been in the role now for 4 years, and I absolutely love it. And I think you've always got that slight frisson of nerves of, is this going to work? If you lose that, I think the danger is, you'll trip over. They always say pride comes before a fall. So I think, you always need that little bit of edge to make sure that you do hopefully perform. No, I think it's just a role that I absolutely adore doing, and I just, my goal always is just to do it as well as I possibly can.
And you do a sterling job, sir. And it's so magnificent to hear you talking like that, because let's be brutally honest, you're as human as the rest of us, and it's refreshing to hear that. So let's talk about ritual in Freemasonry, because we're talking about the theatre of Freemasonry and not just the role of Director of Ceremonies. I know this sounds a little bit silly question to ask, but how important is ritual to what we do as Freemasons and the success of a lodge?
Well, I think it's really important, and I think there are 2 things I'd say about the importance of ritual. I think one is that without ritual, we're just a bit like Round Table or Rotarians, but with slightly funny clothing. So I think it's very important from that point of view. But I think the other thing I think is really important is that if you think about the origins of Freemasonry in the 17th century, you'd had royalists and parliamentarians fighting each other. You had Protestants and Catholics killing each other. You then had the Hanoverian succession and Stuarts, feeling that they should have a Jacobite king. So you'd had all of this conflict, which and many of them divided families. I mean, it was worse than Brexit. So, and then these people said, look, we should leave that at the door of the lodge. We should meet as brothers. We're all men. We shouldn't just be killing that lot of people because that person told us we should be killing them. And so they were trying to bring together all of these different people. Now, how are you going to create trust and a bond between these people? They came up with two ideas. One is secrets. So you have these completely trivial secrets. They mean nothing, but none of us would ever betray those secrets. And so but you've got this faith that if someone won't betray a trivial secret, they'll keep it secret that you're a Catholic or that you're a Jacobite or so on. So that is really important. And then they wanted to create the shared experience. And the shared experience is the ritual. It's one of those lovely things about Freemasonry. Wherever you go, you meet another Mason, you can immediately strike up a conversation. And the ritual is a really important part of that shared experience. We all learn that ritual. We all deliver parts of that ritual. It is one of those things that binds us all together. So I think the ritual is really important. And I think that the ritual is part of that thing that creates respect in Freemasonry, which is one of the pillars of the strategy, is respect. You earn respect by doing good ritual. You show respect by doing good ritual. Respect's always a two-way thing. So I think ritual is a really important building block of the whole thing. And I think without it, it becomes much less special.
Absolutely. And sticking with ritual, how important is it? Because we're not all great ritualists. Some are better at ritual than others. I've often said that we don't sign up to be a Shakespearean actor when we join Freemasonry. But what is it like when a ceremony is just absolutely nailed for those in that room, and especially the candidate?
Well, then it's super special, isn't it? And that creates pride in the lodge. The candidate's had a good experience, which is super important, probably the most important thing. So then it's lovely. And on the converse, if you go to a lodge where people are reading it and it's a mess and so on, well, just people can't wait to get out of the room. So I think the important thing is make sure that you give it your best. But it's important that lodges divide the work up appropriately. Give people the amount that they can do. Don't try to take on more than you can do. Be honest when you need help. But I'm sure that most people can find the time if they make the time. I learn my ritual when I'm walking from my railway station to my office. I've got a 10-minute walk from Marylebone to Portman Square. So people might see me going down, muttering to myself, thinking I'm mad. And actually what I'm doing is I am saying whatever I need to say in the next thing I'm going to.
No, it's great, isn't it? How we all learn our ritual differently, from walking in the park to work, in the car, recording it. There's a million and one ways in to learn ritual. A very good question, actually, and this is from Aidan Delaney. Thank you very much, Aidan. This is a very good question. What advice would you give to a new Mason? I know that's quite a generic question, but coming into Freemasonry, seeing people like yourself absolutely deliver that ritual to perfection, possibly being a little bit nervous about that, what advice would you give to somebody coming in?
So I think the first thing I say is be inquiring. Ask people. Try to, there's that lovely thing in the chart about a daily advancement of Masonic knowledge. But I think there is a huge amount to learn in Masonry. I've been a Mason now for 32 years, and I'm still learning stuff every day. So be inquiring, give it your best shot, enjoy it. And I suppose there's one other thing, which is if anyone else asks you to join something else straight away, just say no. Be very careful about how many things you join and when you join them, because you've got to be careful about your work, your private life. They always come before Masonry. Freemasonry is a hobby. And contrary to what you're told in your initiation, it is not free. So I think people will be well advised to be thoughtful about how many things they join and when they join them, because otherwise it can take over your life, and that's
sage advice. Absolutely sage advice. And this brings me on to another question. Actually, we're on a bit of a roll at the moment. What other orders are you in, sir? What other orders do you regularly take part in?
So other than the Craft and the Royal Arch, I'm in the Ancient Accepted Rite, and I'm in Mark, and I'm in Royal Arch Mariner. So those are the orders that I'm in. For me at the moment, that's more than enough, because I'm obviously not just in one Craft Lodge or in one Royal Arch chapter, or indeed in just one Rose Croix chapter. I'm in 3 Rose Croix chapters, 2 about to be 3 Royal Arch chapters, and 5 Craft Lodges. So I've got plenty going on.
Yeah, plenty going on, but nicely balanced as we discussed earlier. So back to the role of Director of Ceremonies. What qualities do you think a good DC, Director of Ceremony, should have? So I've always tried to compare it to Sergeant Major versus a motivator. What side of the fence should they be?
Well, I'd be much more on the motivator side. I mean, I think one of the most important things you need is some humility. The DC is a bit like the conductor of the orchestra. He's not the principal soloist. He's the person there who's trying to make sure that there's harmony and that everyone is playing the same music and that you're getting the right people playing the right instruments. So that you should almost be not noticed if you're doing your job really well, because everything will be flowing and the focus will be on the people it should be on, the worshipful master or the wardens or the candidate. So I think those are the most important qualities. And I think your aim always should be to make sure that things are enjoyable, because we're not paid to turn up. As I said, there's quite a lot of money we spend on dinners and on annual subscriptions and on regalia and travel and so on. So it's an expensive hobby. So if people are going to turn up, you've got to make sure they have a good time. And different people will have different types of enjoyment from it. A young Mason will probably much more value. I know I did when I was a young Mason. I much more valued the camaraderie, the dinner, the fun afterwards. The meetings were fine. Yeah, they were okay. But what I loved was the chance to meet other people and meet people I'd never have met except through Masonry. And it's only over time, I think, that you gradually get Freemasonry opens to you a bit like a flower, and you start appreciating as you go up through the offices, you start appreciating how the ritual fits together, and you start thinking, oh, this is really rather beautiful. You probably start learning to give some of the ritual, and then when you've been master, you probably give the charge after initiation, which is one of my favorite pieces of ritual in the whole of Freemasonry. And so then you start to value that more. So you get to give that respect. You can't demand respect. You can't command respect. You have to earn respect, and the ritual earns your respect if you apply yourself. And then your view changes, and you start putting much more emphasis on the enjoyment of the meeting and the organization, and your horizons start to expand, and you start to realize the importance of provincial Masonry, and then in due course probably Grand Lodge and Freemasonry as a whole in society. And if you think about it, the social function that Freemasonry has, which is a social life for so many people, particularly as they get older, they retire, they're not going to the office all the time. That social function is incredibly valuable. And particularly for our brothers who've lost their partners or whatever, yes, it's a lifeline. So if Freemasonry didn't exist, really it would have to be invented, because the work it does is extraordinary.
Yeah, wonderful, Charles. Absolutely wonderful. And we've talked about the way it should be. What about somebody's coming into that role for the first time? And I'll give you an example of somebody who I know, and that's me, because I had the tap on the shoulder just a few weeks ago asking if I could be my Lodge DC for the very first time, IPM at the moment. What advice would you give to, not necessarily me, but anybody becoming DC for the very first time? Because on paper, it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it, to get your head around?
Yeah, I think preparation is always important. Just thinking through what you're going to do and what you need to do, other people you need to speak to before the meeting. Different lodges organize themselves differently. So when I was lodge secretary, I farmed out the work to people, but in some lodges, obviously the DC is responsible for deciding who's going to do the work. And if that's your role, then give them plenty of time to learn the ritual. Make sure the candidate's got the lines he needs to learn if he needs to. So a lot of it is preparation. The prior preparation and planning prevents poor performance, is the old army expression. So a lot of it is preparation, and then just making sure you go in with the right frame of mind of, don't be nervous. Everyone's on the same side. We're all brothers. Everyone wants it to work. So don't get nervous. Don't panic. The mark of a really, really great DC is someone who can spot. They've got that radar that there's about to be a car crash, and they can head it off at the pass. And the second mark after that is, if you don't spot it, being able to deal with it without making a big thing about it. So those, I think, are the key things.
Oh, fantastic advice. Sage advice. And Peter Ashton, I knew it was going to be a busy one question-wise this evening. He says, do you think anybody can become a DC? Anybody? Or is there certain qualities inbuilt?
Yeah, of course. I mean, anyone can if they want to be. Doesn't mean that anyone should be.
That's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Just ever think about that, brethren. And thank you very much indeed for your question as well. How important do you think a DC's role in a lodge is to bring harmony within that lodge, to create a successful lodge meeting?
Having been secretary and DC, I think the secretary's role is absolutely the most important role in a lodge, because a good secretary will make a lodge successful and or more successful it would be, and a bad secretary can destroy a lodge. But I would say that the DC is probably the next most important thing, because you are going to be one of the driving forces for the success of the meeting. And as we've just said a bit earlier, if you've got a bad meeting with bad ritual and people that just sort of kills the whole evening. And even if you have a great dinner afterwards, it won't really encourage people to turn up next time. So as DC, you've really got to try to make sure that, as I said, you give people the amount of work they can do. You help them with finding a way they can learn it, whether that's writing it, reading it, recording it, playing it back to themselves, whatever their method that works best for them. And if you can have a rehearsal, that's always great. It always helps. I think it's harder and harder. Certainly my mother lodge now, we find it really difficult for the young guys. We've got quite a few people in their 20s and 30s who are working extremely hard, probably find it difficult to get away to a rehearsal. So we end up sometimes doing things on Zoom, talking them through it. Are you happy? Whatever. I do a lot of walking around my dining room table. I do a lot, both physically walking around my dining room table, imagining it's a floor of a lodge, and quite a lot mentally walking around my dining room table. So yeah, I think it's just being realistic about what people can or can't do. Anyone, my mother lodge, we had a chap who wasn't a very good ritualist, but he wanted to go through the chair. We made sure as long as he could open and could close, we could farm out pretty much everything else. So yeah, there's always a way to get someone through the chair, even if they're not a great ritualist. But don't embarrass people. If someone's not a great ritualist, don't say, here, you're doing all of this, and then expect them to get it right. You're just setting them up to fail. It's not fair on them, and it's not fair on everyone else.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen and brethren, we're joined this evening by the Grand Director of Ceremonies, and still to come, we will be talking about why is the DC's jewel 2 rods tied by a ribbon, and what is the Redman Test. But before we get to those questions, let's ask you about Lodge of Instruction. As a DC, as a Grand Director of Ceremonies, in your opinion, how important is a Lodge of Instruction?
It's a good question, actually. I'm the Grand Director of Ceremonies, not the Grand Director of Ritual. So I don't think I've got anything more to say on this subject than most people. But what I would say is, if someone hasn't learned their lines by the time they get to the rehearsal, it's going to be quite challenging for them.
Yes.
I would encourage people to try to make sure they've learned their lines before you have the rehearsal, because the rehearsal's about bringing it all together and the movements, the ceremonial side rather than the ritual. So, yeah, books open, books closed. I think you sort of slightly play it by ear, depending on whether the brother has learned his ritual, which case books away, or if he hasn't, well, okay, have the book out, but impress upon them the importance of making sure you don't have books in the lodge.
And it's also an opportunity as well, isn't it, Charles, of bonding more with your lodge members.
Absolutely,
well,
absolutely.
Yeah, once a month or whatever that might be.
And I think one of the things I would say is that what works for one lodge isn't necessarily the same as something that's going to work for another lodge. So in the same way that evolution, that wonderful, evolution fills every available evolutionary niche with a creature that is adapted to fit that niche. Lodges should all be different. There should be lodges, we've seen the interest in special interest lodges, the growth in those with, football lodges, rugby lodges, biker lodges, and so on. So if we ended up with 6,000 lodges that were all identical, we would only cater to people that lodge worked for. So there might be some lodges where actually they want a lodge of instruction every week because they meet somewhere remotely, they're retired mainly, and actually what they really want is an hour of chit chat and then off to the pub. And that might be what they want. Whereas you've got a lodge of busy young professionals in London, and they're just not going to be able to commit to that. So you have to think about it when you're running a lodge as to, who is this lodge for? Bring in recruits that fit, more or less what you're aiming at. Don't be surprised if you are meeting at 4 o'clock and having a 3-hour meeting. Don't be surprised if you find it hard to attract young professionals. If you want to attract young professionals, don't open until 6 or 6:30. Keep the meeting as quick as you can. Get into dinner and make sure that people can get away by 9:30. You should be able to do all of that and that way you'll attract young professionals. But equally, if you've got mainly retired people, they probably want a bit of a longer meeting, bit more of that, a longer time over dinner, meet more often. So think about what your lodge is for and what it's trying to do, and then make sure that you are setting it up to work for that constituency of members.
So right, it clearly isn't a one size fits all. Let's talk about the Redman test now. Graham Redmond.
Redmond.
You can go into a little bit more detail who Graham is, but Graham is a very well-known Mason in all of Freemasonry, a previous guest on Solomon Live, and you've described this as the Redman test. What is it, Charles?
So when I wrote an article for Freemasonry Today a few years ago, and Graham's always been incredibly helpful to me. He's been one of the most wonderful mentors I could ever hope for, and a fountain of knowledge for all things Masonic. And so I was having a chat with him about one or two of the things that I'd put in the article before we'd gone to press, and he told me something that the reason I called it the Redmond test is he told me about it, and he said it was a test that he applied to himself, which was after a meeting. He asked himself, was that a better meeting because I was there or not? Did I add to the meeting? And I think it's a really, really good test because, I think there's nothing more upsetting for someone who's trying to learn some ritual and starts delivering the ritual to then have, if they have a sort of a little moment where they've lost a word, and it's probably going to come back, but then suddenly there's someone tut-tutting, there's someone else giving them a prompt. Probably that prompt is wrong. Oh. Really, most of those prompters are really trying to show off how well they know it rather than actually trying to be helpful. So don't be like that. The only person really who should prompt is probably the DC. For the master, maybe the IPM or whoever he's asked for. But you should not be getting involved in the ceremony if you are not taking part in it. And or if you upset the heart of the meeting in any way at all, and I've seen it happen in lodges. I've seen people do things where I think I don't know why you did that, because actually that's just upset someone, and you don't need to do that. So it's a really, really good test. Did I make it a better meeting by being there or not? I think it's a great test.
Yeah, great test and easy to get your head around as well. This is interesting, actually. Ray Walton would like to know, have you been guided by Graham's book on Masonic etiquette today? Have you read it?
I have got Masonic etiquette today, and I have read it. It's a fantastic book. It's a fantastic book. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic, isn't it? And yes, we are seeing Graham on Wednesday, by the way. So a nice timely plug for the book there. A lot of people, Charles, asked me to ask you this question for some reason. And it's an interesting one, actually. Why is the DC's jewel 2 rods tied by a ribbon? Why is that? Why is that put together like that?
I think it's just, the rods are just a rod of office. So there are a number of offices that I can think of. So, you think of Black Rod, Parliament, Gold Stick in Waiting, Silver Stick in Waiting. There are a lot of court appointments, parliamentary appointments that have rods of office or staves of office. Apparently, in the early days, a lot of Grand Director of Ceremonies were Garter Kings of Arms. And they have a rod of office. So I'm guessing, I have no idea, but someone probably who's listening may know much better than I do. But I'm just guessing it's effectively a representation of rod of office. And there are 2 of them. You think about the sword bearer's jewel is 2 swords, not just 1 sword. So the DC's is 2 rods of office.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sending those questions in prior to our Solomon Live this evening. Back to the ritual just for a second, if that's okay, Charles. Given today's time constraints, especially for younger working men, do you think learning ritual has become more difficult nowadays with the extra responsibilities that perhaps many men and women have nowadays?
I think it probably varies from person to person. There are probably some people who genuinely are so busy they really do take struggle to find the time to do it. But I think most of us, it's a question of working out how to make the time. So as I said, I learn my ritual now when I'm walking to the office from Marylebone Station. But when I lived in London, I'd learned it on the tube. And on one occasion, a wonderful chap came up to me and he said, "Oh, what are you revising?" And he spotted I had my little blue book open, and I was reading it on the train going from Waterloo to Bank. And I visited his lodge, and he visited my lodge. Poor chap died a couple of years ago, but he was a lovely chap. We became good friends. But everyone has to work out when is the time for you to learn it. Is it 10 minutes before you turn your light out at night? Is it on your commute? Is it in the morning, when you get up? I think it's, everyone could find the time if they apply their minds to it. And you probably need 10 or 15 minutes a day. If you think of all of us, I'm sure, listen to music. I'm sure lots of us have music where we know the words. We probably all know the words to the music we grow up with. If you can learn that, you can learn ritual.
Great advice, and as we knew it would be, Charles, this evening, having you with us. Somebody here doesn't want me to mention their name, so I won't on this particular occasion. Don't worry, it's nothing too heavy, by the way. Festive board. As a DC, do you have a top do and don't you could share with us, please, Charles?
Do I have a top?
Do you have a top do and don't when it comes to being a DC at a festive board?
Well, I must admit, my mother lodge is a very relaxed mother lodge.
Yes.
So what we do is we give the master the toast list, and he just gets on with it. And we don't really do more than that. So I think it depends on the lodge. As I said, the DC is the conductor. If you've got a symphony orchestra, that's going to produce different music to a chamber orchestra. So if your lodge is one that likes a lot of formalities and so on, well, then provide them with the formalities. And if your lodge is one that's very relaxed and they like to keep everything short and sweet and simple, then do that, follow that. Whatever you do, don't assume that because you've seen something in one lodge, it'll go down well in another one. Because it might not.
Great question, and yes, thank you for asking that, brother. One more question, then, Charles, before we get ourselves out into the sunshine, the late evening sunshine. What are your priorities for the future moving forward? So, for example, what role can DCs play with our 7-year strategy? Because we talk about that quite a lot. It's essential, as is the DC's role.
Yeah, I think the most important thing at the moment is to make sure we support the strategy. And I think engagement and making sure that people actually enjoy their Freemasonry is critical to the success of the strategy. And that is something that DCs can directly influence. So I had a workshop for provincial and district DCs not very long ago, trying to get that point across. They, I hope, will cascade it down to their individual lodge DCs, because we really can make a difference to the enjoyment. I think, when you came out of the First World War or the Second World War, and there've been a lot of conscription, national service and so on, people perhaps wanted that shouting sergeant major type DC. They were quite used to being told, you must do this, you horrible little man. We're way past that now. The modern person today would not recognize that as being something they were put up with for fun. So I think, we can definitely play a big part in the success of the strategy. And equally, if we're not careful, we could frustrate it if we don't adopt the right attitude. So I think it's super important that DCs, just focus on delivering enjoyment.
Yeah, what a way to finish it. Before we do say goodnight, other than quarterly communication next week in Wales, what else are you looking forward to as a Grand
So we've got the Provincial Grand Lodge of Middlesex investiture. So that's double header, Craft and Royal Art. So a new Provincial Grandmaster, a pro-Provincial Grandmaster Middlesex, actually, and Grand Superintendent. We've got a bicentenary for the Lodge of Emulation Lodge of Improvement. So that's their 200th anniversary, which I'm going to be very excited to be at. And then we'll have Supreme Grand Chapter in November. So plenty going on. So yeah.
Charles, you have been absolutely fantastic. Not only have we got to know you better, but we've learned so much in the last 45 minutes or so. But most importantly, have you enjoyed your Solomon Live experience?
I have. I hope one day I might be lucky enough to be invited back again, Brody. But it's been great fun. Thank you.
Well, listen, I'll see you Tuesday. Charles, thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. And ladies and gentlemen and brethren, a very special Solomon Live for you to put in your diary. Our next Solomon Live will be Tuesday, the 10th of October, where our topic will be Night at the Museum, where we will be live from Freemasons Hall. We're taking the show on the road, so to speak. What could possibly go wrong? The Museum of Freemasonry is full of unusual artifacts with incredible stories which tell the history of Freemasonry. We'll be talking to curator Mark Dennis. He'll be taking us on a journey through his incredible collection. Honestly, one not to be missed, and we're live from Freemasons Hall. That's Tuesday, the 10th of October, 7:30 UK time. And if you haven't done so already, please register for Solomon. You'll find it at solomon.ugle.org.uk, full of useful and fantastic content for your daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. Until then, thank you for joining us. Stay safe and cool, and we'll see you back here next month. Good evening, everybody.